Resonant Life, episode 40, titled Revised Terms and Conditions. Hi again, welcome back. Thank you for joining me today, and together today we'll dig into some more ways of changing our minds and our actions to become happier people, as well as creators of happiness for others around us. And as I always say, if we do that, then we are truly making the entire world a better place. Ripples in a pond that radiate out. And indeed, that may sound overly optimistic, idealistic, even cliche, right? And yes, it is. It is positive and optimistic. And I want to stay positive and optimistic. And I want to share positivity and optimism. Look, as you know, every day brings more terrible news of conflict, war, exploitation, of suffering, of environmental and natural disaster and loss of life caused by it. And in the face of all of that, acknowledging it all and knowing we can only do what we can do, acknowledging our smallness, our near impotence in the face of these global issues, we will still do everything we can do to help, to make the world better, to make people's lives better. And that starts here, working on ourselves and doing so together. So just as selfishness, self-interest, greed, anger, cynicism, just as these can spread from one person to another like a virus, happiness, satisfaction, optimism, and positivity also spread. And they are the antivirus, the remedy of the virus of anger and all the other negative emotions. Happiness, satisfaction, optimism, and positivity will spread from one person to another. So let's be the locus. Let's be the center, the source of happiness for all those around us. Like a lit candle, our light radiates out, touching others. And to extend this metaphor, we can touch our burning wick to another candle, and it lights from us. And that one light lights others. And those ones light others still, exponentially from one small flame to thousands, to millions, simply from our sparks of sincere optimism and shared happiness. Right now, let's set our hearts and minds with this intent. And with that, I want to touch on some unfinished business from the last episode, which I think was number 39. And in that episode, we talked about and dug deep into listening with the heart, listening with our hearts, not with our brains and minds. Listening this way allows us to be truly present for the other person, as you'll recall. And we don't judge when we do this. We don't advise. We don't try to solve. We just listen and help that person find their way. This is one way of using the flame from our lit candles, from our optimism and compassion to help others find optimism as well. Also in the last episode, describing the power and impact of listening with the heart, I realized maybe I made it sound too easy, and I didn't reflect on myself and my own success or lack thereof of doing this, listening from the heart. In fact, a friend recently called me to share anxiety and frustration and even fear around some recent health scares. And what did I do? I immediately started the usual problem-solving, anxiety mitigation, expectation setting kinds of strategies that come from the brain and our very human and very natural desire to calm and help. And I caught myself eventually not following my own prescription for listening with the heart. And I tried to adjust and to stop solving and to start listening with the heart. And in the end, hopefully I was of help. But also I learned and got insight in on just really how hard it is. So the whole experience, my friend's upset and worry and my trying to fix it, made me realize also that not every situation calls for just listening with the heart. Sometimes perspective, calm perspective, and sharing personal experiences of similar problems. Sometimes this is helpful too, and important, and useful, helpful. So, despite my seeming confidence in listening with the heart as an effective and spiritually powerful way of being with people, I recognize that we also need to be problem solvers, fear reducers, and fixers sometimes. At first, I thought that this makes a hard thing, listening with the heart, even harder. If we have to figure out when to engage our brains in problem solves versus disengage and let our hearts take over, what's the formula? What's the cue? There is no formula. And that's hard, right? It's even harder. But as I reflected on this more deeply and longer, I realized there is another way of listening with the heart that helps to problem solve and rationalize while still being present. And it is listening closely and uncovering the emotion that is behind what the other person is sharing. Words will be one thing. There's an emotion behind those words that isn't obvious, maybe even to the person who's speaking. So we need to pay attention and dig deep, look deeply. What is that emotion that the other person is sharing indirectly? Is it anger? Is it fear? Frustration? Helplessness? Anxiety? Most likely a combination of any or all of these. And naming these core emotions for the other person can help. And this is done by listening with the heart. It is with the heart that we can pierce through the details of what is being said to seeing what is the fuel behind the words and what is being said, the background emotion, the energy. So saying something like, "This must make you feel especially anxious," or "This would make me worry if it were me." Things like this, calling out and naming in a personal way, a self-identified way, what the person might be feeling underneath and not be fully aware they're feeling. This can slow things down, bring everyone to some deeper, slower breathing. It can diffuse the negative, overwhelming emotions and then open space for more rational problem solving. So, as the listener, breathing calmly, deeply, and from the diaphragm, this is how we stay focused and centered and our hearts open. Remember what we've learned about breathing? When we're stressed, when we're angry, anxious, frustrated, our breathing is shallow and fast. We don't even notice how shallow and fast it is. And this is reflective of our brains being in a fight or flight state. By intentionally slowing it down, breathing deeply, relaxing tension, we can name and tag emotions. And naming them bring them more under our conscious control. We tame them, master them in the moment with that deep breathing. And as the listener, one listening with the heart, we have to keep our breathing deep and slow and steady. When we're listening to another's problems and challenges, it is so easy to get caught up in their stress and anxiety that we also shift into more fight or flight mode. We get excited and involved and engaged, and we need to bring our own breathing low and slow and deep. And then identify the emotions of the other person in an empathetic way, and how we might also feel or have felt similarly in those or similar situations. And then the opportunities will open for calm problem solving, or even just simple empathy, compassion, grace, and presence. And as I said, it is not easy. In case I wasn't clear in the last episode, it isn't easy. It goes against our socialization, against our DNA, but the positive outcomes it can generate when we are even mildly successful are precious. And this brings us to the topic for today. In so many episodes of A Resonant Life, I've talked about us engaging with others without condition, without distinction. But I realized maybe we've never really dug into what that means and how to be truly unconditional. We've recently talked about equanimity, one of the 4 immeasurable states of mind, and we've talked about how it arises from not having conditions or distinctions or differentiating between friend or foe. But to get there, it might help us to really delve into looking at how we are wired to create conditions, to make distinctions, and to unconsciously put others into one of 3 categories. Those categories are friend, stranger, and enemy. And while Buddhism has many complex and detailed explanations of this, for our purposes, maybe we can keep our discussion rooted in our everyday lives and experiences, and begin to approach a deeper wisdom related to being unconditional, or seeing our lives and others without conditions or distinctions. So let's look at it this way. There are 2 opposing forces, so to speak. On one hand, we have evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, which transmits species survival mechanisms via DNA to help species survive and thrive. Popularly, this is called the lizard brain. You've probably heard people talk about the lizard brain. Our limbic systems are the primitive structures of our brain that manage basic survival functions. Fight or flight being one of those survival functions. On the other hand, we have our higher brain functions, which include reasoning and creativity and empathy and compassion and altruism. There's no spirituality in this particular way of talking about this today, at least not yet, but we'll get there. So it is our lizard brain, our amygdala, that is always processing input from our senses as to whether we are safe, whether we have opportunities to eat, to procreate, to dominate. Just scanning, looking, taking in data, reacting. As modern humans, our lizard brain is moderated by the higher functions of our prefrontal cortex and other structures nearby. These are reason, compassion, creativity, and so on. In daily life, I think of it like there's a dance or a cooperation between these higher and these lower brain functions. Typically, I think it is fair to say that the higher brain functions They mitigate, control, and regulate the lower functions. This is how we create and live in cooperative societies, how we create culture, how we create prosperity, how we create art. Obviously, though, this dance isn't perfect. Because if it were perfect, we wouldn't have war, want, violence, conflict, and hate. Maybe I'm getting a bit too much in the weeds here, but I think it is important to have a basic grasp of how the biology works so we understand how to leverage our conscious minds and our spiritual energy and aspirations to get closer to that world without war, want, violence, conflict, and hate. To be conscious creators of that peaceful world. So that scanning amygdala is putting everyone and everything into those categories: enemy, friend, stranger, dangerous, neutral, safe. What do we do then? We can't control the amygdala. It is on autopilot, and it is foundational to our evolution. But we can consciously override its decisions with effort, with attention, determination, patience, grace, and intention. What we can try to do is consciously move everyone into the friend category and every situation into the safe category. And of course, there are caveats to this. People who threaten our well-being, our safety, and mental health, it's okay to leave them in the enemy category for now. And situations that are truly physically or emotionally threatening or dangerous, yes, they should be treated as such. But in the everyday course of our lives, we can take action. We can move everyone, even people we don't like, toxic bosses, for example. Everyone, even situations we don't enjoy, we can move it all into the friend and safe columns with effort and intention. Another easy one, right? I hear you challenging me. That acquaintance who always vexes you, trash talks you, undermines you, or the toxic boss who takes credit for your work while denigrating you and your efforts. We're supposed to move them to the friend column? Yeah, right. Besties, right? BFFs. No. Okay. Yes. At least we have to try to. I know it's hard. We know. We already know that we cannot change others to be the way we want them to be, right? We can't change the toxic boss to be less toxic. We can't change an irritating acquaintance to be less irritating. We can't make people the way we want them to be. We cannot change the people that vex and frustrate and anger us. We cannot change their attitudes. We cannot change their behaviors, nor can we change how they feel about us. But we can change how we feel about them. And in changing that, we change how we present ourselves to them. And that isn't even necessarily a conscious change. Now that might be the secret sauce that does change how they treat us. It's kind of sleight of hand. So it comes down to this. Here's an analogy. To make a spark that lights a fire, we need a flint and a steel. Boom, 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 right? Or a match in a rough surface. Two substances that react under pressure. If we align with our supposed enemy, remove the potential for spark, for conflict, and we override the amygdala's efforts to keep us in opposition, then we become peacemakers. And we've moved them into the friend category. And this isn't easy. And it's not always successful. At least, it's not always successful in eliminating conflict. But at least we are not part of the conflict, not engaged in it. As such, we're still peacemakers. Take a look at the people around you, those in your everyday life. Family, colleagues, neighbors, friends, others. I'm sure you don't like all of them. I don't. I'm sure some of them are annoying. Maybe you're mad at someone. Perfect. Try to move them all into the category of friend. Psychically, consciously, push aside the urge to reject them. Refuse to nurse the old wounds, the grudges, and the hurts. Just let it all wash away and see everyone as a friend. This is really a meditation or contemplation practice. And it can be done sitting quietly anywhere, anytime. On the bus or train, while driving, walking, having coffee. Even more effectively, when you're actually engaging with someone who's historically in the enemy column, breathe deep and move them to the friend column. The point is to build a mindset, to build neural pathways, a concrete habit of seeing all others as friends, not threats, not enemies, not even strangers, friends. And as a mindset, it is something that becomes an always on part of who you are. The more you practice this, the more you do it. And this is a giant step toward being unconditional, toward not making distinctions, at least with people, with others in our lives. And that is a first step and a giant one toward becoming a true peacemaker. So this is a practical look at how we can concretely shift from being conditional and making distinctions between people and situations, and instead become singularly focused on being peacemakers with our thoughts, with our words, and our actions. The Dalai Lama had another way of explaining all this. It was very elegant and simple. He once said that all sentient beings have one important thing in common. One thing. They are all trying to be happy. In that insight, then, we find common ground with all others. Even the mosquito that is biting you is part of that mosquito's quest to find happiness in the way a mosquito experiences happiness. And since we're referencing Buddhism, this practice of becoming unconditional and without making distinctions, this is not only part of the process of manifesting equanimity, it is also recognizing and extending grace to the truth that all beings have a Buddha nature. From you, me, our enemies, our friends, to that mosquito. Buddha nature, the potential to become enlightened, to become a Buddha, just as Shakyamuni did, to awaken to the truth that he awakened to and taught. From the Buddhist side of things, it goes even deeper. So let's have a quick look at that. Buddhism encourages us to work to change our minds profoundly, to not look at things dualistically. Instead of seeing two partners in the dance of life, instead of seeing the interactions of ourselves and others, and also separating the ideas of compassion and wisdom, Buddhism calls us to accept all of this, all of these things we see, perceive, and tag as outside versus inside, as up versus down, mean versus nice, light versus dark, friend versus enemy, to see them all as one thing, no distinction. Seeing like this is an expression of awakening. And it is a mind resting in peace. In Buddhism, this is called non-duality. So do you recall from the last episode of Listening with the Heart, the last exercise was to recognize how we have a tendency to try to contain the universe inside the boundaries of what we can understand, like trying to put the infinite inside a jar, our little safe jar of knowledge. And of course, that is not possible. So the exercise was to instead visualize ourselves dissolving into the universe's vastness, into infinity, or to be a raindrop that falls into the vast ocean, merging with that vastness. This is another way of understanding non-duality. And with that, wow, we've covered a lot today. And I guess the most important thing to take away is the exercise. The practice to start making conscious efforts to move all people we know and encounter. Move them all into the friend category. Move all the situations into the safe category. To make sure that the mind bucket that holds strangers and enemies are empty. We want one full bucket and two empty buckets, right? Friends full, strangers and enemies empty. Doing this, we will change. We will release and unlock a power that impacts our worlds and fosters more kindness, reduces conflict, and ultimately creates a more peaceful, hopeful, and positive world, initially around us, but it will radiate out. And that will make us happy. And we'll achieve that goal of cultivating more abiding happiness in our lives. So, thank you for joining today. There's a lot to think about and meditate on and practice, and I hope we can all make progress and experience some increased happiness before we meet again. So, talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please subscribe and share. If you'd like to share your own experience, thoughts, or ask a question, please send an email to mike@resonant.social. With gratitude, theme music is courtesy of Stock Audios, distributed by Pixabay. A Resonant Life is a podcast from the Time Is Now Productions.